All right, welcome back everybody to the Friday Dada lecture series. I want to thank you all for being here today. I know, we're past spring break and we're moving into the second half of our semester, so I appreciate you guys taking the time to log in and to listen to today's presentation. I want to go ahead and thank our speakers committee. Without their support, we would not be able to bring in such amazing artists and lecturers. This week, we have the profound pleasure of actually having one of our alumni come back to speak with us. We have Yvonne Osei. Osei is an acclaimed German-born Ghanaian multidisciplinary artist, curator, and art educator living and working in St. Louis, Missouri and Philadelphia, PA. Her international creative practice explores topics of beauty, racism, and colorism, the authorship and ownership of history, as well as the residual implications of colonialism in post-colonial West Africa and Western cultures. Her work also utilizes textile design and clothing as artistic mediums to foreground socio-political issues of global concern. Osei received her MFA from Washington University in St. Louis, where she was a Chancellor's Graduate Fellow, Mr. and Mrs. Spencer T. Olin Fellow, and Danforth Scholar. She holds an MS in Fashion Design and Business from Lindenwood University in St. Charles, Missouri, and a BFA from Webster University in St. Louis. As a visiting artist scholar, Osei has been invited to Pentecost University in Accra, Sterling College in Kansas, Indiana University Bloomington, University of Missouri, Pacific Northwest College of Art in Portland, and TEDx St. Louis. Osei is the 2016 to 17 Romar Bearden Graduate Minority Fellow at the St. Louis Art Museum, and the 2017 through 2020 Curator in Residence for the Millstone Gallery at the Center of Creative Arts. She's the recipient of the 2018 St. Louis Visionary Award for Emerging Artists, the 2018 Creative Stimulus Award by Critical Mass for the Visual Arts, and the 2019 Futures Fund grant by the Luminary, also in St. Louis. So if you guys could give a warm welcome to Yvonne Osei.
Hey, can you all hear me okay? Excellent. Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for taking the time out on Friday to come and hear me speak. It's always exciting to be back at Webster University, my beloved alma mater, and I'm really thrilled to be here to share some aspects of my practice with you all. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here.
And while she's getting that ready, you guys, I do want to remind you that we always have a question and answer portion at the end. So if you guys have any questions as she's giving her presentation and you don't want to forget it, feel free to put it in the chat and we will get to it at the end of the presentation.
All right. Okay, but this is showing everyone the other slide, correct? Trying to have that. Oh, there we are. Okay. Yeah, so today I decided to speak specifically about textiles speak and the power that lies in the language of textiles, because I use that a lot in my work, and I love textiles, right, and expressing myself with that medium. This is, I think, primarily because in my culture, textiles is used on a day-to-day. It's this sort of way of expressing very layered cultural meanings. What you're looking here is a group of people, and I believe even like the way they are positioned what they're holding, what they're wearing, the way the textiles is being tied on their body all mean specific things, right? So you have even the totem, the head of the household, which is the man on the left holding the what looks like the staff with the crow on it, the crow represents a specific clan in my culture, which is the Ashanti culture. And then you have, of course, the king that is in the red and black there. But it goes to show you, just by looking at the colors, I know that they're either going for a funeral or, you know, paying respect to the family of someone that's dead. Because red and black kind of symbolize, you know, death in my culture, and is used in textile language to represent that. And the status, you can also tell the status of the way of a person by the way they dress, even with how, if you see the small boy has tied the textiles or the garment around his neck, which is different from how the person holding the staff is. So just to give you a sense of that. But you kind of also see a shift in just the color palette from this that picture to this picture, where everything starts to look bright and very vibrant. Again, I can, without necessarily knowing where they were going, I can absolutely see that they're going for a celebration. So in my culture, right from the onset of growing up, I started to realize that there were layers in the way textiles is being applied, that it was being used to relay complex cultural, you know, communication and information from one generation to the next. And so I have taken, you know, an affinity for textiles also because it's this sort of medium that traverses between private and public space. And I'll kind of talk more about that as we go on. But here's a picture I took in 2015 in Accra. So I moved to the United States in 2009, and I go kind of back and forth to my country because my parents are in Ghana. I am a bona fide Ghanaian, and I go back and forth quite a bit. But I also started to realize that in Accra, which is the capital of Ghana, I realized how clothing was kind of shifting and changing the cultural landscape. So here is a picture of, I believe I was in a bus, and I quickly took this picture just to show you how a lot of the textiles is, or a lot of the clothing is being transformed into a very sort of westernized sense of it, that the use of textiles is kind of being morphed into these ready to wear goods that are then imported in the country. But again, just to give you a sense of my practice, I love to travel. I always say that 70% of my creative work is done outside of my studio. I love to engage people. I love there's something about public space that you cannot get in your studio, and that excites me. So whether I'm on a boat going to a small town called Nzulenzu in the western part of Ghana, or I'm empowering a group of people through art and through performance art, it's all a part of my practice. Here's an image I took of secondhand goods that have been imported into the country in I believe it was Cotonou, another part of West Africa. Again, here, basically just showing you how I go on the sites. These are bales of clothing that have been imported into the country, and I'm trying to figure out where they're coming from and for what reason, and for what purpose. And also to find out that the clothing also comes with a lot of pollution, because a large percentage of the clothing that's imported ends up being trash or unusable clothes. Again, the presence of clothing is huge in my work. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so I really started to look at clothing a little bit more critically, I believe, in 2013 thereabout. And what you're looking at here is beautiful women, I believe from Nigeria, really using clothing as a statement of personhood, right? The head wrap that you're seeing is something that is normal in the West African cultures. We would wear a head wrap and then a waist wrap for ceremonies like weddings, for naming ceremonies, and for festive occasions. So I decided to borrow that language to talk about the politics of textiles and clothing. So here you see me, I'm in Greece wrapping the heads of Caucasian men, right? And just by the simple act of wrapping, you start to realize a relationship between Caucasian men and African women. I have gone into different shops here in Europe and in the United States. And a lot of times when I go into the shops and they have like the global aisles, that's kind of the first place I gravitate to. And I start to realize why these, where the origins of these textiles are, right? So these are some of the textiles I saw at the global aisles of a lot of shops here in the United States. And they say they're African, but in actuality, they are really as foreign to me as they are to anyone looking at them. And so I start to take these along on my journey and just really ask questions about them and try to find out where the ownership of these textiles are, both culturally and also economically, who's benefiting from these textiles that say they're African. So this series of photographs that you're looking at, it started as a performance, of course, in the spaces that I took these, where I would, approach a Caucasian man and ask if I can wrap his head and his waist with this cloth. And of course, a lot of times European men, this particular photographs were taken in, I believe it was in Geneva in Switzerland. And they're usually very gracious and very kind with their time, and they would, wear it, and then I'll ask, if they could pose with it, and then we'll have a dialogue about the textiles and why I'm there to begin with. But I'm really interested in just how textiles can form that relationship between two people of different races, of different cultures, really of different locations coming together as one. Another body of work that I'll go into is Africa Clothe Me Bare. And it's a project that I started in 2015 when I was still at Washington University pursuing my MFA. This was during a time where I had become heightened about monuments from I believe it was, at that time I was having a study abroad class in Berlin, and learning about the Holocaust and seeing how monuments and memorials were built for that, and that the idea of collective remembering was so strong in that city that I started to get a heightened understanding of monuments, memorials, public sculptures, and what they mean to us. So on my travels, I kind of chanced on this bronze sculpture here called Jeanette that was made by a French artist. And I was struck by just how fragile she looked in the space. So almost automatically, I had my backpack on, and usually my camera is in the backpack, and I have some of these textiles that I reference that say they're African, but in actuality, they are a representation of Africa to someone else and have been washed and tainted in so many ways. And I instantly just stacked my backpack in my duffel bag and then put my camera on it and started to record me wrapping this sculpture up, right? Because I just felt that she was really frail for the space that she inhabited. She was nude and she was facing this huge building in this huge complex. So that was something that happened almost like, it was something that, it was spontaneous, really. And when I came back to the United States, I decided to continue with this body of work, and I haven't stopped ever since. And for me, it's really about the time in which these sculptures were made, and our idea of the public consumption of these sculptures. But I'm also questioning nudity and nakedness, like what makes a body nude and what makes a body naked. Even in a time when male dominant artists had control over depicting the nudity of female, it was a specific type of female, right? It was the Caucasian female and not the Black female. And so this idea of nudity being this legitimized way of saying, oh, your body is, should be admired or rendered in this fashion, excluded my personhood as a Black female. And so my presence there is also, in a way, showing a sort of alliance or a sort of sisterhood. And a lot of narratives, we hear that white people are always giving back to the Black community. But in here, through my work, that idea of the colonial narrative is sort of changed. Here, I am giving back, I'm restoring this female sculpture. But I don't want to play down on the power of doing performances in public space. Here's just an example of, I just threw this in there to give you a sense of how, in which spaces and in which ways that I'm creating these, wrapping these sculptures. Yeah, so again, this is in Spain and Cologne. And usually what I'll do is I would research online about the sculpture and the position where it's placed. Sometimes I don't go to it prior to me being there. And I didn't know that there was going to be a marathon in the area that I was wrapping on the day that I went. So as you can see, there are police officers there, and it's a really busy place. Each performance is different, but I get a lot of fulfillment in the conversations that happen in these spaces, how people respond to the sculptures that I have clothed. Sometimes, depending on the space, I would leave the clothed sculpture and leave my camera kind of running to see how people are interacting. So I would leave the premise and then return in 2 hours or 4 hours, depending on where it is. And then this is just another reaction. Again, the power is really in how textiles can speak, right? How textiles can usher in this underlying level of, talking about issues of gender inequality or issues of race. One of the most recent Africa Clothed Me Bears that I did in the United States was one that was actually inspired by the Black Lives Matter Plaza. I was really, this was a moment for me where it seemed as though there was this awareness of our ability to change. And this idea of the yellow, this sort of white yellow text, the color really spoke to me. And so I decided that a part of my practice really is about going and bearing witness to these sites and to these places. So I decided to match my clothing head to toe with that kind of yellow. I looked for a blazer that was yellow. a bag that was yellow, even my shoes were yellow. And I decided to pay homage to the Black Lives Matter plaza. But I realized that about 6 minutes from this plaza was a sculpture that I had been researching about for about 3 years. This is the sculpture right here. And so I decided to go and then clothe the sculpture, but also give the sculpture a mask that I actually sewed specifically for this, wrapping. I would mention that I do not leave the clothes on the sculpture. I take them off. So it's putting it on and then taking it back off, because I think putting her back in the sort of naked form transforms her from nudity to nakedness. It kind of creates a sense of a heightened awareness of her naked body in that space. Okay, so after, purchasing the textiles that, a lot of textiles that I felt that I needed to kind of research on, and that it didn't quite represent, my culture or other African cultures, that there was this sort of bastardization happening in the production of textiles that say they're African. I realized that by purchasing them, I'm a part of that system in a way, right? That I'm purchasing and I'm pumping, my funds back into a system that I don't necessarily agree with, or that I'm grappling with. And so I decided to venture into creating my own textiles and really understanding what it means to do that, and ways that the language of textiles can talk about specific things that matter to me. And so I have created this database, which is ongoing, which is growing, where I would take photographs of people I come into contact with. Of course, I'll approach you, ask permission, and maybe, if I think your freckles are amazing or your hair texture is incredible, I would approach you and take photographs, ask to take photographs of your skin and part of your body features, which kind of looks like this. And then I would transform them into textiles. But what you're looking at here is a textile of a good friend of mine that had moles on her belly, and she had heard that I was in the business of taking photographs of people for textiles. And she asked me to photograph her, and I transformed this into textiles, which you would see in the next slide. But the whole idea was that this idea of challenging the superficiality of race. Even in my Webster days, I was really interested in understanding what it means to be white and what it means to be Black, and the friction of all of that. Again, I was a Guinean coming into the United States, and being a Guinean, being an Ashanti woman, and understanding identity so differently, coming here and being reduced to a color, and the implications of that was something that was really jarring for me. So this is, talking about race and using my work as a platform to talk about the complication of identity is something that's important for me. And so what you see me wearing is her skin, the Caucasian skin. And then of course, the detail on the necklace and in the waist area is of an African-American skin. But the idea was that, what if textiles gave us a way that clothing, that our skins can be interchangeable, right? So if we could buy a pair of pants that were made out of Asian skin, and buy a blouse that was made out of skin of a Sudanese, then all of a sudden, almost skin becomes fluid, right? Then what really becomes of race? What really becomes of race if textiles is rendered in skin patterns that are then shared by everyone? Then maybe the superficiality of race would be known through that body of work. So here I'm wearing a Victorian styled garment in my friend's complexion. And the beauty of it was when I went to her and I presented myself to her, she couldn't even recognize her own skin. So a lot of times I would bring my textile designs and my garments into public space. Here is kind of what that looks. I don't know if you all can see the details of some of the hair on that garment. There are these blonde hairs on it that I think looks pretty amazing. Again, just to give you a sense of what that looks like. Okay, so although I create in public space, I also bring those experiences into the museum or gallery space. All right, so what you're looking at is a catwalk that I held at the Mildred Lane Kemper Art Museum in 2016, where I brought live drumming into the space and people were catwalking to the clothes. But again, I'm fascinated with this idea that clothing in itself is a membrane of skin, right? And I am putting photographic renditions of skin to alter the skin of another person. So there's this sort of redundancy of skin that's present in here. Here's what one textile design, what that looks like. Again, this is titled Indications of Time. All the textiles that I create have titles similar to in the Guinean context. Titles are really important for textiles because they convey a message. I remember my mom and I would wrap textiles as gifts for her friends, and she was really particular with what the textiles, the motifs in the textiles and the titles of the textiles. Sometimes even the titles are printed on the actual textiles themselves. So this is Indications of Time, which is celebrating the scars, the moles, is really celebrating aging, and also celebrating kind of the scars that make us who we are, right? And that's what this is about. So here is a short clip of my sister's. You always have to start from family, right? So my sister's braid, one of her braids and her finger, which I have transformed into a tweed pattern. And then the tweed pattern was then constructed into a two-piece suit and then put on a Caucasian body. Again, I'm really fascinated with what it means for one person's body part to be attached or worn by another, and how that then changes the way we view the person or the way we see the person. This is ripped. This woman, when I met her, was wearing these ripped jeans, and I took photographs of the ripped jeans and then created this pattern and put it back on her in a form of a gown.
Going to turn slowly.
So again, this is the neck piece that she's wearing is it's called Laughter Cures Hunger, and there are photographs I took of a Caucasian man and then an African woman, and the African woman had a gap in her teeth. I have a gap in my teeth. It's seen as a symbol of beauty, but just again, looking at the difference in even our makeup, and really it's really about the celebration of our individuality, but also talking about how similar we are as human beings. And what does it mean for, again, a body to carry around another body? What does that mean? These are thoughts that I'm thinking about when I conceptualize this piece. But I also make textiles that addresses issues of race, issues of gun violence, things that I think about on the day-to-day, things that we hear about in the news that are really close to us sometimes. And this garment, this textiles is called Shoot Me Not, using the iconography of a gun to talk about gun violence in the United States. Here is it one, here it's worn by two people. This is a still from a video of them catwalking across each other. Okay, so I'm gonna go a little bit faster just so we have some time for conversations. Here's, I just wanted to also talk about Tailored Landscape, an exhibition I had at the Lohmeyer Sculpture Park. And the whole premise of the exhibition was to interact with the park, right? And to invite people to look at the park in a different way. And so here are some of the examples of the sculptures at the Lohmeyer Sculpture Park. Now that spring is out, I entreat you all to visit the park. And again, I'm transforming the works into a language that I understand, which is textiles, looking at aesthetics from West African textiles to really create my own language. And for me, it was the challenge of having that exhibition was finding a way that I could insert myself in a very Western culture, in a very Western collection that they had there. And one of the ways I thought to do that was to look at the works as elements of design and create my own patterns through that sort of expression. But I also kind of really wanted people to not only see the park in a certain light, but to see it and be a part of my way of interpreting that park. And so I created these fitting rooms where you could actually enter and wear jackets that had patterns that I had created based on the artworks that were outside of Lohmeyer. I also invited women that looked like me, you know, African women, African-American women, and almost in a way inserted them back into the landscape of Lohmeyer, right? Inserted them into the collection of Lohmeyer. If you look closely, the Tony Tassett piece of the eyeball here, you see two people that were visiting the sculpture. I kind of honored the way the park was being used in my textiles, right? I loved this idea of the presence of people and how people were using the park. There was one pattern which I haven't put in here, but it was made from a family that was having Chick-fil-A on the park. And I approached them and asked if I could take a photograph of them. Of course, they were gracious enough to say yes. And they became a part of that installation. Again, it was like a 1-year residency that had an exhibition, a solo exhibition at the end of the residency. And so this was a good way of commemorating, almost like a historical document of what had, what I had encountered on being in the park. So this is kind of what the installation was like. It was really looking at the architectural landscape, and you could also think of it as the architectural the building was wearing clothing in a way. What does it mean for buildings and architectural landscapes to have clothing elements to them? Of course, it covers the floors, the walls, and even parts of the ceiling of this space. And more of inserting beautiful African and African-American women in my textile designs. And really, it's really about voice and visibility for me, right? How do we start to rethink and relook at the way we understand, art and spaces, and white spaces? How can we give agency to people that have been rendered voiceless in history? Okay, so delving into more textile designs, again, textiles really has a way of speaking. This is a new body of work that I am working on now. This is just a textile design for it. But this is, this body of work is looking at St. Louis. Let me put in, I see that my Mac is about to sleep soon and I don't want to lose you all. One second here. All right. Okay, so this is, I created these textiles that are supposed to address the legacy of St. Louis, the landscape of St. Louis. And what you're looking at is one of those textiles called No Child's Play. And these are photographs that I took in Cherokee of this a couple of children that were playing on the street, and one had a toy gun. And by looking at the toy gun, it took me directly to the story of Timor Rice. In 2014, he was shot by a police at a bus stop, and he was playing with a toy gun. The thing that was in his hand that caused an alarm for his killing or his of his murder. And again, these are imagery that we see on a day-to-day that again, looking at the possibility of Black families or Black children to have that innocence, that the work is really addressing that. So I've created these islands that talk about that, and that kind of transport us to talking about issues, other global issues or national issues around the killing of Black men. Again, here you see that he becomes the void. What he is pointing in his hand is what actually kills him. And I'm using photography as a way to talk about complex issues pertaining to race through textiles. Here's another textile piece called Quit Tripping, Quick Killing. And it's really looking at the quick trip that was involved in the murder of Mike Brown in 2014, the same year as Timor Rice. And this, again, the textiles, I'm thinking here's a detailed shot of that, of the char. I actually went to the quick trip in 2014 to bear witness and to take photographs of the site. And these textiles, I imagine them being these, I really believe that art can extend what we see to what we experience, what we carry around. That clothing, and I think that's why I love clothing so much, that it's such a part of you. You're carrying it around, you're proclaiming what you're wearing, that it can have that level of criticality. And so I definitely, as I'm building these textiles, I definitely see them being used as upholstery for couches that are then transformed into sculptural elements for spaces, and really living with history and learning to live with the atrocities that are going on in our country and being confronted by that through art. This is Eye of the Witness. Again, it's a lot brighter than, let's say, Quick Tripping, Quick Killing. Again, I see this being used as a funeral cloth, to emphasize what actually happened to Mike Brown. Again, textiles in my culture it could even be a monument to a person. There are some textiles in my culture that are actually memorials to a person. And so I see this operating on that sort of level where this textile becomes a memorial of Mike Brown that is supposed to be used in specific ways to honor his legacy. Eye of the Witness is a little bit different. This is me actually in standing close to the Quick Trip, bearing witness to what has happened on those sites. And I think for me, it's really important as an artist to be invested in that sort of research of being there and showing up and looking, looking and actually treading the same paths that history has actually taken place on. I'm gonna quickly end with a throwback. This is an artwork I created when I was a student at Webster. I believe I was a sophomore or junior at that time, called Blooming Bridges. And it was it was from the idea of, I gathered at that time, Webster is really known for its international landscape. There was a class I took, I believe it was International Studies, Intro to International Studies. And everyone in that class was from somewhere else. I had friends from Pakistan, Senegal, I still do. I always say that when I open Facebook, I'm amazed because Webster gave me a news feed that looks like CNN, right? The friends are all over the place. We're talking about Vietnam, we're talking about South Africa. And I think that's one of the most priceless things that I have had at Webster. And so I gathered, I believe about 12 of my friends from different parts of the world that were students at that time at Webster. You can tell from the different complexions here. And the idea was for them to have paint in their hands. So they could step into a room with one paint in their hand. So you could have blue, another person could have yellow, another person could have red. And the idea is for you to mix by touching and rubbing off other people's hand, so that you don't leave the room with the same color that you started with. And as they were doing this, I would take photographs of how they were interacting. And so these are just photos from that performance that happened in that room that day. So here are some of the examples of that. And recently, I have been working on this commission piece where I revisited these same photographs, and I have transformed them into motifs for textiles and transformed their look. So what you're looking at is a block of a textile motif. I'm saying this to say that you have to cherish the things that you create even earlier on in your career. Like nothing is wasted. I still have all my my art created from Webster and my sketchbooks created from Webster, and I revisit them from time to time because that's at the core of who you are and how you express yourself. Again, here's another motif for the textiles from the same day where there was interaction. And here's a sketch for a textile. Again, I just wanted to take you through the process of how I lay my textiles and things like that. And then here is a 2021 textile called Givers and Takers. So if you look carefully, these are a composite of images from the Blooming Bridges series. This particular one where you see a lot of pinks is actually from this particular photograph. Okay, and then just to give you a sense of the detail of that. And then this being the blue version of that. Again, just a little bit of detail. This, of course, is going to be created in different ways as interior interior artworks for several spaces. Again, this I showed you the block of this textile. This is Champions Beyond Reach. And here is a detail for that. Again, that's it in yellow. And then that's the detail for that. Yeah, I think that this brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you all for listening. I'm looking forward to engaging in conversation and in questions that you have. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yvonne. So we got anyone who feel free to unmute, ask your question with your video turned on or off or whatever. We got a couple of questions in the chat already.
This is my favorite part.
Yeah, exactly. So it's her favorite part. So let's make sure we get some nice conversation going. So one of the first questions we got in the chat was, do you ever create quilts? Do you design fabric for sale, such as quilting material? I'm just thinking of all of the storytelling that can go along with the American tradition of making quilts, and how that would potentially tie into this. So I'm interested to hear the answer to this.
Yeah, I think that's something that I have thought about. And I have thought about quilts, but I've been thinking about this sort of applique textile that is used in my culture in Ghana, where you have, you cut out the textiles and then use embroidery as applique for, more expansive work. So definitely quilting is something that is right up, my alley, and it's something that I will absolutely explore. I think that I will say that I just literally graduated from Lindenwood with my fashion degree. I know school never stops, but when I realized that textiles and garment construction was something that was fascinating to me, I put myself back in school to really understand the construction of it. Prior to this, I used to maybe design the textile, do the textiles, and then draw the clothing and have them made. But sometimes how you have it in your head, but the person can't relay what you have. There was this one time where I wanted 3 colors, and the person was like, well, every garment has just 1 color. Why do you want 3? And it's not possible, right? So there's sometimes you have to further your research and invest in yourself to actually get and create what you see in your mind's eye. But I would say that absolutely, I definitely see quilting as a part of this, and it's something that I'm exploring as I move further.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got a question from Lauren. When working in public spaces, like with your wrapping of sculptures and people, it sounds like people have been very welcoming to you. When I've worked in public spaces, I often get anxious about people potentially reacting negatively. What is your headspace like when you work in public spaces / has anyone reacted negatively to your wrapping work?
Oh, this is a good one. Look, it's okay. So it's a lot of nerves, right? So initially, at first, what I would do is anytime that I'm going into a public space, I'll put on sunglasses, because in my head, it's like, no one can see me kind of thing, just to boost my confidence and to actually look badass while I'm clothing these sculptures. But on a more serious note, people are willing to invest in you when they see that you are passionate about what you're doing. I always love this quote, light yourself on fire and people will come and watch from afar, right? Come and watch you burn from afar, because greatness really attracts greatness. And I think that with persistence and with, showing up and being persistent about the things that you believe in, people are going to invest in you, in doing that. But it's definitely, of course, not an easy task at all. I have realized that in Europe, European audiences are a lot more forgiving and welcoming than American audiences. And I would say I'll do 2 scenarios here. The first one was one of the earlier works of Africa Clothed Me Bare. I was wrapping the sculpture, and I kind of, when you're wrapping, like I kind of saw two police officers, from, standing right, a little bit afar from me, but they were there. And I was freaking out because I was in another city. I was in, I believe it was Switzerland as well. I was in Switzerland. I was like, oh, here we go. They're going to arrest me already, right? And so I quickly, wrapped her up. And then when I got down, I was standing on a plinth. When I got down from the plinth, I'm like, you know what, officers, just go ahead and, arrest me already. And they laughed. They had these, adorable French accents and said, no, you're a nomad artiste. You're a nomadic artist, and we love you. We love it. She looks more beautiful than she was before. They asked me about, my work and things like that. And so they were really engaged, and they actually waited for me to finish, and walked with me to get a bus back to my my hotel at that time. But in the United States, yes, there are spaces that have been really friendly, but sometimes I would go to museum fronts and wrap these sculptures up because, and again, I don't ask for permission. Everything is guerrilla style. And of course, with museums, they're really protective of the art. But I always say that it's outside. The sun has been in the sun in harsh weather, and I'm gently wrapping. But anyway, there's an incident where the museum guard actually came to see me and was like, well, you can't do that here. But luckily, it was at the end of the performance where I was unwrapping. So the museum guard actually helped me unwrap the sculpture and brought it to a completion. So it's been all good. It's been all good.
Excellent. That answered the second question that was coming up, which was, has anybody ever tried to stop you? Monica wants to know, do you typically use the same types of fabric? I'm assuming that is in relationship to the found fabric, but also the fabric that you, the textiles you create. What are your favorite types to work with?
Okay, so initially I started with textiles that I found troubling in different shops. And then I kind of broadened it to textiles that I would, buy in Ghana. Like, for example, a lot of times you can tell how the textiles is kind of morphing because we produce a lot of textile, a lot of fashion, right? And I realized maybe I would see a textile that was familiar to me that had my traditional Guinean traditional symbols in it. And all of a sudden that same textile now has pen drives in it or flash drives in it, right? And so I would buy that because I'm like, whoa, that's new, right? So I would collect them, and then I would use that sort of textiles in my garment. But now I'm really starting to move away from purchasing purchasing from shops and creating my own textiles for the works that I am doing. But if you're going to use textiles, just use it in an ethical way. Try. I know it's really hard in the world that we live in now to think of ethics and fashion, but there are people that are doing it in an ethical way. Try to research as much as you can about the textiles, how it's being produced. Make sure that if there's symbols on it, that the symbols that are being used, and and then have fun, right? I do a lot of thrifting for garments, for textiles and things like that, like constructing and deconstructing garments from thrift shops. That's huge for me. So depending on how you want to go about it, there's a lot of free stuff outside. So a lot of people are always donating clothes. I know of a couple of artists that work with used clothing to create garments. I mean, I can shoot over a list of artists that are using textiles in this way to help. And there are also artists that are using other materials in place of textiles. For example, there's an artist that uses hair as textiles, so you can look outside of that and find other materials that you can manipulate for whatever purposes that you're looking at it for. But I think that I would say that most importantly, your voice is what you need to harness. And then the mediums kind of follow through. I don't box myself in any medium. Like I say, like it could start from a performance to a photo to a video to an installation to a sculpture. I mean, it's going all over the place. And so I think that the most important thing as an artist is staying true to your voice and knowing that your voice matters, and showing up for yourself.
I know I'm personally curious. We were seeing a couple of your pieces that you had documented in the presentation that are like incredibly ready to wear. I'm thinking of that like two-piece suit. I'm thinking of those two lovely gentlemen in the park wearing sort of the mismatched opposite shirt and pant combos.
Right.
That stuff looks very ready to wear. I'm wondering if you're interested in sort of pursuing a commercial side to this, or is it always going to sort of fit within the larger holistic art practice that you have of performance, installation, public identity, documentation, just because those look incredibly saleable pieces.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
just got your fashion degree, so.
That's right. Absolutely. I think that the textiles, the garments, that particular project was a project that were 30 garments that are ready to wear. That again, it was really about having people wear the garment in public to really address issues of race and complexion politics. So this was something that I wanted to go out. And it's a clothing line that I am looking at. I have a database that I'm still collecting. There are even textiles I've designed that look like camouflage, but they're all skin. And so these are things that I'm working on to create clothes for that. Aside from that, I've had commissions where I have made scarves. I've made a lot of ready-to-wear items that are circulating in the system. But I'm again really looking at considering the ethics of clothing and also looking at the economic aspect. So a lot of times I would create the textiles, and then it was important that I take it home for people to make them, because I wanted some of the funds to be invested in my culture and for my people. And so just trying to find ways that I can be a little bit more mindful of the economic structure of my production. And again, really investing in ways that I can cut off a lot of middlemen to start to print my own textiles, make my own clothing, and then think about outsourcing it to the commercial scenes.
So ethically made and sort of also giving back to, communities as well.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. I think we have one more technical question and then we'll sort of end it on that. They're asking, how do you go about making your own fabrics? I'm assuming they're just asking about like, where do you go to sort of print these like textiles? Because I think a lot of people don't know that that's like a thing.
Yeah. So there are a couple of places. Trust me, when I was starting, I did a lot of trial and errors. I would use companies in New York and California, but I've always check in St. Louis first, because that will cut you a lot of headache and color correction, things like that. Nova Color is actually right downtown. They're really great at printing on vinyl and things like that. So a lot of my vinyl work I would go through Nova Color, but I've also recently discovered Coastal Business. Coastal Business is close to, it's on 270 right by St. Charles, thereabout. I'll send the details to Emily and then she'll forward it to you all. But they have been printing on all sorts of textiles, linen. Well, I won't say linen. They do a lot of polyester-based textiles. But again, with polyester, you have different textures. You have the canvas, you have polyester-based textiles that look like linen and things like that. So I haven't found a place that actually can print on natural, fabrics like silk and things like that. But for polyester-based fabrics, they are a really good resource. They do a lot of commercial work and things like that. So those are my two go-to places. But yeah, there's a
Excellent.
lot of stuff outside of St. Louis, but I try to keep things in St. Louis and to again support the city and the businesses here.
Well, yeah, and not cut, I think when you extend beyond your local area, the chances of middlemen coming in and
For
the
sure.
lethality of sourcing becomes a lot harder to pin down and identify. Well, thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing.
This was a joy.
Congratulations on getting your fashion degree from Lindenwood.
Oh, thank you.
I think that's absolutely amazing, and I look forward to seeing how everything kind of evolves and progresses in the future. Everybody's saying thank you so much, and they love your work in the chat.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. Honestly, thank you for coming back and engaging the Webster community. We always like to have our alums come back.
It's always a joy.
And yeah, okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now.